Hey everyone, we are super excited to be spreading awareness and destigmatizing mental health in the Black and Brown communities.
This podcast is a safe place for us to discuss our adversities and even our shortcomings. We all have a story.
Just remember, no matter what we go through, our story goes on. What's up, everyone? We are back with episode 5 for Our Story Goes On. And I am excited for today's episode. I'm excited for every episode. But it's going to be a good couple of episodes, these next 2 episodes, But so I hope everyone is doing well. And this week has been pretty good for me. A lot of good opportunities are coming my way, but I don't really want to talk about them yet because I don't necessarily want to jinx anything. But I am excited for a couple of new opportunities that might be coming my way. And a lot happened in 1 week with those opportunities. So I actually went out to dinner with a friend last weekend, and she's also a therapist as I am. And it's good to connect with my friends who I met in college and grad school, because it's good when you can talk and vibe with someone that is in the same boat as you or maybe similar in the same boat and has your best interests in mind. And I really love this friend so much because we don't see each other too often, but when we do, it's like we're catching up, and she's just really, really sweet. And we just got to talking about our jobs and what we're doing, because I hadn't seen her since my wedding. And before that had been a little bit too because of COVID and all of that. So it was really nice to see her and, talked a little bit about the struggles of being in fee-for-service, because that's what I am in right now, as I have discussed with you guys before. And yeah, we were just talking about different opportunities and what she's doing. So it kind of opened up my eyes in a lot of different things. And yeah, so just with that, I was able to, take on a different perspective, and I'm kind of excited for some new things coming along. So yeah, so for today's episode, and as you guys know, Jo is still not with me. Bear with me. She is coming very soon, but for now, it's still just going to be me. And for today's episode, we'll be talking about the path to self-acceptance. So that is a path to fully loving yourself, even through the most difficult times, and learning how to accept yourself, even through those times as well. So I recall in season 1, we did discuss body image and how to overcome negative body image. However, self-acceptance is about accepting all of you, including your physical and mental/emotional characteristics, so your personality traits. And it also is about accepting your flaws, the negative aspects of yourself, and it's really just about understanding that your mental and physical attributes come together and accepting those for what they are. Now, trust and believe, preaching to the choir. I understand how this can be very difficult and maybe even seem impossible depending on your situation. But just like everything else with life, it takes time, it takes practice, it takes determination, but it can eventually happen for you if you take the time to do that, because self-acceptance is really important, and it is actually a really big part of your mental health and your well-being. So before we get into all of that, I want to discuss actually the difference between self-esteem and self-acceptance. And the reason for that is because I think sometimes people may get confused on those two terms. Now, self-esteem and self-acceptance are related, but they're not the same thing. So, self-esteem is how valuable you perceive yourself to other people. It can be the strengths that you offer to the world, and it can also be about having confidence in how you handle specific or difficult situations. Clinical psychologists talk about healthy self-esteem. When they do talk about healthy self-esteem, they mean that you have a reasonable positive self-image. So if you think too much of yourself or believe that you are worthless and have nothing to offer, it basically means that you have an unhealthy self-esteem. It's a spectrum in a sense. And I say that because there are people who may love themselves a lot and think too highly of themselves. And it doesn't mean they actually have a good self esteem, because at the end of the day, if you think too highly of yourself, it's not like a reasonable self esteem in a way. It's not a reasonable sense of self, because you're not, if you are thinking too highly of yourself and you're demonstrating that, you're probably lacking some other things. You actually might be feeling insecure about other aspects or factors in your life. So that's important to remember as well. Now, in contrast, self acceptance is much deeper. It does not depend on external factors, a lot like self esteem can depend on. And self acceptance is also not conditional. So, for example, if you're going through a breakup, or let's say you got fired or laid off from the job that you're currently at, you would still be able to give yourself compassion. So it means that you recognize that your worth and value goes, like, it's not like you're able to remind yourself and not criticize yourself when those kind of things happen. So I know a lot of times when we all go through difficult situations, sometimes we may beat ourselves up. We may think why. We may start to go down the rabbit hole of what you did wrong or how bad you are or whatever it may be. So, having self acceptance is understanding that, yes, this happened, but you're not going to put it on you in a sense, right? You're not going to just sit there and criticize yourself or criticize your characteristics all because you may have been going through a breakup or losing your job or getting laid off. Now, of course, yes, those are difficult things, and I'm certainly not downplaying those situations, of course, but it's about learning how to understand that these things are a part of life, and don't put yourself in a box where now you need to criticize yourself in order to make things better in a sense. So, on the other hand, I mean, on one other part of this too is that, like I mentioned before, with self-acceptance, it also means that you are recognizing your worth and value goes beyond your physical attributes and actions. So to me, that looks like you're no longer placing your physical attributes to being good, quote unquote, to being worth something, or even being better than the next person, right? When you're not able to fully accept yourself, you may become overly self critical or obsess over some of your shortcomings. So, I'll kind of discuss this a little bit personally as well when it comes to looking beyond your physical attributes. So, I've always been a very small person my whole life, and especially when I was a lot younger, and when I was a young girl going into high school, I was always very small. And I recall girls in my sister and I went through it a little bit in high school. And I remember some girls would always ask the boys that I dated, like, "Oh, what does she have to offer? She doesn't have anything," like physically. And I remember just always laughing about it, because I'm like, well, that should prove that I'm even better in a sense, right? Because boys are maybe not going for me just because I'm checking off a box physically. I'm able to offer a little bit more than just a physical thing. I'm able to offer my personality, right? Anything else. So that happened a lot, and it didn't necessarily, at that time in my life, it didn't necessarily erode my self-esteem, because I think it almost made me think to myself, like, I'm not going to go down to that level of, hey, I'm not good enough because I don't have this size of that or this size of this, right? So, and that was when I was in high school. I mean, things have changed in my mind sometimes, but I always just remember that, like, thinking, obviously, people aren't necessarily putting me in this box of just that. And that happens a lot, right? Especially with young women, girls, especially nowadays with social media, it's like we're females, unfortunately, have a lot more pressure, I feel, than males do when it comes to our physical bodies. And I've said this before, and I just feel that the pressure that we have to go through is a lot more difficult because of just the ever changing, like, what is acceptable for a woman to be beautiful, for a woman to be sexy, for a woman to be hot, right? It's changed. Like, just 20 years ago, it was the hot thing to be skinny and to be thin. Now, not so much, but it's about understanding that most women, or not most, basically all women, right? We don't really have control over how we are when we're growing up, especially when we're teens, right? When we're at the age where we are learning about ourselves, where we're supposed to be developing emotionally as well. And then to have people criticize that is the reason why so many young adolescent girls are going through so much. And then put social media on top of that, and it's a whole other ball game, right? So I just kind of remember that and thinking that I wonder when people place you in a specific box of just one thing, whether that's physical, whether that's mental, and they're not looking at anything else, you start to wonder to yourself, does that mean that you don't have self-acceptance? Does that mean that you're only focusing on one thing, and how does that affect you as a person, you know? So it's just something that I had thought about as I was preparing for this episode. And I feel that a lot of things like that could go a really wrong way for someone who may not have been able to manage it as well. So it's just something to look out for anyone who is listening as well or watching. Just try to look at it like that and remember that people are just way more than just one thing. And that's what self-acceptance is. It really is about understanding our flaws, being able to love ourselves through everything, and being able to accept everything. So, the importance of self acceptance on your mental health is that it leads to reduced levels of stress, fewer depressive symptoms, better emotional regulation, and just all around higher positive emotions. And this it can also lead to increased self worth and having more compassion for yourself when you fail, which we kind of just got into. But those are all the benefits of using self acceptance or practicing self acceptance or starting self acceptance. All those things can really be significant for your mental health. And the important thing when it comes to your mental health is that all of this is like this is just one part of what could help with your depression, what could help with your anxiety, and what could help with your stress. Because at the end of the day, you're waking up with yourself every morning, right? So just try your very best to make it a good kind of home for yourself, you know? um, but yeah, so let's get into ways to start the path of self acceptance. So, how does one fully start accepting themselves? So, there are a lot of different ways that you can start this journey. So, I am going to just mention a few, and in no particular order, of course. And it's important to mention these because in my research or even in my own experience of self acceptance, these were all the most common, the ones that I found to be the what was it like yeah, I guess the most common, because a lot of them are interchangeable. A lot of research will tell you different things, but I think that these are the most important. So number one is to practice self-compassion, which I mentioned before. This involves giving yourself warmth and understanding during difficult times and not to criticize yourself. A couple ways to practice this is talking to yourself like you would a friend, and maybe writing down how you'd like to help yourself. So I hear this a lot in the start of self-acceptance, in the start of increased self-esteem, perhaps even, is that the way that we talk to ourselves matters. Like, it matters more than anything. And a lot of people will say, you need to start talking to yourself the way that you would a friend. So if you are going through a situation and you find yourself wanting to criticize you for maybe not being good enough, quote unquote, or maybe not accomplishing what you should have at this point in your life. Would you really say that to a friend? Most likely not, right? You wouldn't necessarily sit there and tell your friend, like, wow, well, remember when you said that you would have been done with this 6 months ago, a year ago? Why haven't you done that yet? You would never do that to a friend. And, or maybe some people would, but I can guarantee that that friend of yours is probably not really going to want to talk to you too much after. So the way that we talk to ourselves really, really matters. And why not just start practicing how you would talk to a friend, right? And also writing down how you like to help yourself too. So I have always said this a lot, and I know I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, is that I think that writing things down really makes a difference because you're writing it down, you are being able to see it visually. So if you start to write things down that you want to be able to help yourself, you can look at that again, right? So that's always helpful. So the second step is to let go of things you cannot change. When we are constantly in the past or we're wishing what could have been or what should have been, it's hard to move past that kind of thinking, right? And we have to understand that we cannot control the past and we cannot control the future either, in a sense, right? All we can really do is control what's going on in the present moment and accept and let go of things that we cannot change anymore. So one way you can do this is to perhaps write a letter to yourself, again, writing. Write a letter to yourself on what you need to let go of to start welcoming things that you love about yourself. And that could look like needing to let go of maybe past experiences of someone telling you that you're not good enough. Maybe letting go of a bad relationship that stems from stress that started a lot of maybe your issues. Maybe letting go of some parts of your childhood, right? And besides writing that letter, I recommend also going to a therapist for this as well, because a therapist can really allow you to explore what you need to let go of, why you may need to let go of it, and kind of go from there. So that's a really important step, I think, in starting the path of accepting yourself fully. Third one is to embrace your abilities. So list your strengths, write them down, no matter how small or big. And whenever you may start to feel down on yourself, you can refer back to that list. And this list could be, like I said, no matter how small or big. So the list, if you're really good at cooking, you may not think that's an ability or you may not think that's a strength, but it is, right? You're able to cook, which means you're able to take care of yourself, perhaps take care of your family as well. And that could be small to a person, right? So start small if you need to, but then start thinking about even the bigger things as well. The job that you have. If you had graduated from college, that's a huge accomplishment, right? Or maybe even if you graduated from high school, that could also be an accomplishment. Just listing things that you feel brings good to the table in a sense, right? Like I said, write them down and refer to that list whenever you feel that you're going down on you, like you're putting yourself down or something like that. So that's really important. The fourth step is to speak kindly to yourself. Like I mentioned before, how we talk to ourselves matters. So, but it goes beyond just the way that we talk to ourselves. And I want to get into that for a little bit too. So, self-care and treating your body right through exercise, adequate sleep, that all plays a role in being kind to yourself, right? So speaking kindly to yourself and also being kind to yourself is a way that you can start this path of self-acceptance. And I say that because physical activity, like we've talked about, reduces so much stress. It reduces depression, it reduces anxiety. And if you're taking care of yourself physically, you can then start taking care of yourself mentally. Physical and mental health go hand in hand, even though people may not want to believe that, it totally does. And we tend to treat our physical health sometimes more than we do our mental health. And that's not always fair because physically, if we're exercising or if we're eating right, that all goes to our brain in a sense, right? Our brain and our gut all connect is really what the whole thing is, in a sense. So just be kind to yourself and speak kindly to yourself. And that's one way to do it. And then the fifth one is to forgive yourself. So many people who struggle with self-acceptance may be beating themselves up for past mistakes. Understand that you did the best that you could at that time. Acknowledge that you can no longer change your past failures and mistakes, and then move on. It's about giving yourself permission to move on from any kind of past mistakes that you may have done. And I think that self-forgiveness really does not allow people to grow as much because they're stuck in the past again and you're beating yourself up. And how can you fully accept yourself if you're constantly criticizing yourself, if you're constantly beating yourself up for something that happened in the past? So try that as well. And that actually might be like, I know I said in no particular order, but if you want to do these in a particular order, that one may actually be the first step because you may have to kind of fight those inner demons in a sense. And lastly, stop comparing yourself. I know this is so much easier said than done. As I mentioned before, especially with social media, when it's in our face every single day, where we're scrolling and we're thinking, wow, this person has a much better job. The next person's making so much more money than me. This person travels all the time and I can't do that. Or this person is getting more likes than me. Oh my God, the list goes on. So it's just really important not to compare yourself. And I know it's hard, but it takes a consistent and conscious effort to not compare yourself. So you can start this by practicing internal validation. So giving yourself affirmations in the mirror every morning, writing things and looking at that list of strengths. And I would say limiting yourself on social media as well. So taking breaks from social media, and make the goal of just scrolling through your timeline or through your For You page or whatever you want to call it, and just doing that. Try not to like maybe go on other people's profiles if you have the notion that you want to see what they're up to or if you want to compare yourself to them. Just kind of make the conscious effort if you feel that you do need to be on social media to just kind of scroll in your following, like, the people that you follow in a sense. Okay, so those are the steps to start the path of self acceptance. And as always, I do hope that it reaches one of you in that sense. And I know that in these times, it's a little bit more difficult, but you have to put yourself first. And it's certainly not selfish to do that at all. All right, so we are going to end, as usual, with our affirmation. And I have here is that growth doesn't happen without changing your thoughts. So always make sure that you remember that we wake up with ourselves, we go to bed with ourselves, and our brain is there telling us these things. So you have to change the thoughts in order to grow. All right. I hope everyone has a great week, and we will see you next time for episode 6.